Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. It's a rather chilly late fall morning. I'm tripping over tree roots, but we're doing our best. If you're new here, I'm Squatch. This is what's left of a 1936 Caterpillar RD-6 that we are attempting to restore. We've been finding some things, but I don't think it's anything we can't overcome. And yeah, if you'd like to be caught up on everything that's happened to date, I think this is episode number 23. Click on over to that playlist. I've got the first 22 in order, and at this recording, 11,253. Good number of you all have already checked out that playlist, so excellent job. I'm happy to know that that's coming in handy for people. So, on today's list of things to do, a lot of stuck press fits and tight parts. Maybe not so many tight ones on here because I've been finding some things, but we'll be taking some very tight pieces apart. It'll be a lot of puller work. But I noticed this last time. There we go. That play doesn't feel like bearing play to me. I think this sprocket is loose on the splines. We're going to find out. So we've got this machine to do a lot of pulling work too, and we've got the rest of this parts tractor as well that will be doing all the same puller work too. So fun with pullers. If you're down for that, stick around. There, that's a little bit better. Get you out of that sun. We're about to get going. All right, first up is this curved flat guard. We need to take that off. 4 bolts go around and hold it into the pillow block. It's just a dirt guard, really all it does. All right, we didn't break any bolts. That's good. Next up is this cap. Just 4 bolts have to be taken off. Interesting tidbit, this 1B3051 cap was also used on the D4s of the same time period. We briefly touched on that in a prior episode here. Now we have this lock that surrounds the nut. It keeps the nut from moving, and there are 2 holes in it, one right here, one right there. They go over this dowel right here and that dowel right there. And when you look at the underside of the cap, it has that nice step that lock seats right into. So that's what holds this tight. That nut now is a 2 1/4 size. Now we can take this heavy washer off. Here we are. This heavy washer also has 2 holes in it that surround 2 dowels on the inner hub. And that's how this lock system works. The heavy washer dowels to the hub, and then the lock that surrounds the nut dowels to the heavy washer. And that's how you drop the nut in the dirt. Always a solid plan. Okay. That's how you keep the nut in the center from rotating. So at this point, the pillow block just slides off, and there is a bushing inside here that you always want to look at. And they're usually loose, and I can tell this one has not received any grease for a while because there should be a grease fitting on a short tube right there on the bottom. Here's the one from the other side. That's what that's supposed to look like right there. But it still gets overlooked quite a lot because it's down on the bottom of the track frame, or it's toward the top of the track frame, I should say. But it's inside that channel, and it's not easily noticed. So pretty common to see these been running quite dry. Something's been throwing some corn in here too. Now, looking at the hub, what I'm seeing here is good. We have the keyway that's on the dead axle at the top. That's where it's supposed to be. And that means it positions the hub so that this pinch bolt down here is at the bottom. So if this pinch bolt was rotated around, or similarly your key slot was not right at the 12 o'clock, that means there's a good chance the dead axle is loose in the case. And that's a very bad thing. If it wears that press taper bore out in the case, you'll never get another dead axle to stay properly tight, and that means the whole back half of the tractor is really broken. But everything's good here. Key slot is at 12, and our pinch bolt here is at the bottom. So we need to take this pinch bolt out. Here's the head of the bolt. There's a washer style lock beneath that. This is a rubber seal that seals where this hub has the slit in it at the bottom, and then a lock washer and a nut. Okay, our washer style lock looks like this. It's got this little hook on it and goes under the head of the bolt down here. And what that does is it grabs into one of the slots on the spanner nut here, which locks your sprocket bearing in adjustment, keeps that spanner nut from turning. Okay, here's what's left of the rubber seal. That's how it's shaped. This one's starting to tear. I think I just did that pulling it out, but you always have to dig those out. They're always very well stuck, but that's how that goes around the bolt, just like that. Well, let me do this real quick, and then I'll explain the setup here. Okay, we are at the point of popping this hub off of the end of the dead axle, and this is a tapered press fit behind this journal. And if you've been keeping up with the feed, you've already seen all these pieces when we built the pulling adapter that we'll probably be using in a minute. But to go through it one more time, I've replaced the nut, okay, so it's acting as a catch nut. And what I do is align the flats of the nut with the two dowels that are on the face of the hub, because if you have a point of a nut over the top of those, when this pops loose, it's going to clash with the nut, and then you'll have to repair that dowel before you put it back together. If you align the dowels with the flats, it'll pop loose and nothing gets hurt. So I've hammered a chisel into the split that's at the bottom of the hub, and that spreads it a little bit because the hub grabs onto this spanner nut right here. When everything is so dirty and greasy, this looks like it's all one piece, but the parting line is actually pretty much right at the base of the square accents here. So with that spread, we've hopefully let loose of the castle nut to the point that we can put the spanner wrench on and back this castle nut out, which puts pressure on this hub. And if it all works according to the shop manual, the spanner nut is enough to pop this hub off the taper. In reality, this spanner nut is almost never enough to pop the hub off the taper. But I loaded up with pressure anyway, because if we have to use a puller, it makes the puller's job a little easier. All right, this one's moving easily, but thankfully it's kind of a grease ball on this side, so I don't think there was any rust between the bottom side of the hub and where the spanner nut rotates inside of it. It's already getting tight though. So we'll load it up with the cheater pipe. That's about all I want to put on that. It says it's rated for 900 foot-pounds. Pretty sure we saw that. And no surprise, the hub is still in place. So let's go get the puller. Okay, so let's see what this one wants. This was the puller setup that we built back in episode 20. So I skipped the setup. You all are well familiar with that. If not, you can go back, check it out for yourself. We're at 8 tons. This one's quite a bit tighter. Looking at 10. There we are, popped at 11 tons. As I expected, we'll need the puller for this side too. Okay, we are at 15 tons force right now. That is the most I've ever had on this adapter. That was 17. Well, we are learning about our puller today. pulled the first side at 15 tons, and these 9/16 bolts that grab onto the hub drifted out just fine. The 17-ton pull, they tweaked enough that I could not pull them by hand, and I can see just a little bit of a tweak that goes that way in the bolts. So I'd say 15 tons is our tested safe limit of our puller. I knew these bolts were going to be the weak link. I don't know if it was the 17-ton pull that bent them, or if it was the kapowie when it let go. Either way, I would say we hit 15 tons on this again. It's probably time for heat or to start tapping that hub to see if we can make it dislodge before the bolt has to cope. And no worries, I purchased extras when I was building this because, like I said, I knew these bolts were going to be a lot weaker than this plate. So, well, interesting to know. Okay, fresh bolts. We are pulling the hub on old Frosty, the parts tractor, and spanner nut did not dislodge the hub on this one either. Not a huge surprise. Look at that, 7 tons. Wow. Look at you, Frosty. I thought you were going to be the tight one. Old narrow RD-6. That was a lot tighter than, yeah, we're loose. That was a lot tighter than this. Wow. Nice surprise. There, we got that moving. Just in case, puller is not tight. But I've been recording every time I back a spanner nut off, just seeing if I can catch one that will push that hub off the dead axle. Nope. Still not gonna do it. Eight tons. 10. There's our 15. Okay. I don't want to pull any harder than that. Let's ring the bell. That ringing sends a lot of vibrations through things. Yeah, we were up at 17 again on that one. It just gets colder every morning. Lots of frost out today. It's all right. I'd rather it be frost than snow. So we continue on. Now that we've had our fun with pullers, it's time to get back to work. So outer hub will just slide off at this point. Okay, and inside, here's the bellows seal, and the facing is quite worn. Yeah, not really a surprise. That needs to be replaced. And then inside of that is the outer bearing race. Okay, I wonder if we can get the bellows seal pulled out by hand. Nope. Well, maybe. They pack in with so much dirt and old grease and everything around the outside that they can be yeah, we're not gonna be able to pull this one by hand, but we'll take that all of that apart on the bench after we are done here. And here is the keyway that locates that outer hub. That looks good. Outer sprocket bearing. I'm seeing wear on the rollers, so that is probably ready to expire. Behind that is the sprocket nut, and then we have the fold over lock for the nut, and then behind that the sprocket hub. But look at this. That spanner nut should not be loose at all, and that's where the fold over lock tab used to be on the flat. It's just been drifting. Yeah, well, I pointed out we had some play here at the beginning of this episode that I didn't think was bearings. Watch the hub in relation to the nut. Look at how loose that is. So, wow, we won't need a puller for this side. This side's just going to fall apart. But I'll walk you through the disassembly steps anyhow. The next step is to get this outer sprocket bearing pushed off of the bull gear hub. And the way you do that is you counter rotate the spanner nut so that it begins pushing it off. But before we can do that, we do have fold over lock tabs that we're going to have to flatten. We have one right here. Fold it on the nut. Spin this around. There's usually more than one. Yep, here's another one right here. So we'll fold both of those back. Now, if this would have been done right proper, I would have needed the spanner wrench with the cheater pipe to even get this sprocket nut loose. But since the last person did not put any of this stuff back together near tight enough, well, at least it's easy to take back apart. Now, as we rotate this sprocket nut counterclockwise, it will push this bearing off of the bull gear hub. At least it gives us a good start. And here's a trick. To keep the sprocket from moving, I take a couple longer bolts and put through the drum holes on that final drive pinion flange and then run my long pry bar through them so that as we turn counterclockwise on the sprocket, the bolts will bind on the bar and keep everything from moving. Gives you a solid backstop. Now, this is one task where you will not regret having a good spanner wrench. Sometimes these bearings require a heck of a push. Now, the reason why I am running the spanner nut back off of the bearing is because you can't get the bearing all the way off just with the nut. Otherwise you'll run out of threads under here and then you'll bugger them on the ends and you'll really have a mess on your hands. But it's at this point where you can see the bearing is started pretty well off of that hub. The manual shows another tool. It's a fork-shaped spacer that goes between the spanner nut and the bearing, takes up that clearance. You've got your nut back on good threads, and then you would go ahead and start pushing it the rest of the way off just using the nut. In my case though, once I get it this far, I can put one of my hydraulic pullers on and just finish the job. Not very graceful, but that is the quick way to do it. At this point now, it's a good idea to pull the sprocket nut completely off. Don't let that go too far away. We'll be putting that back on shortly, but you can get the fold over lock off then as well. And it's a good idea just to have a look at what your spline fit is like before you try to pull the sprocket. We know this one's loose, so let me push this back on. Okay, when we seat that by hand, you can see where the bull gear hub splines become visible. They start sticking out proud of the hub face of the sprocket, and that is a bad fit. Those splines are worn out, and the only thing that can cause that is if something's ran loose and worn everything. At this point, all this sprocket is good for is probably cutting the spokes so you can save the rim and welding the rim onto one that still has a good hub. All right, look at the splines on this other sprocket though. This one's good, still tight, so we'll need the puller for this. But this is the type of fit you want to see. The splines that are on the sprocket hub are well visible, but this thing tightened up onto the bull gear hub before the bull gear splines could be seen. And that is just a general rule of thumb for any Caterpillar press fit taper. You want everything to tighten up after it's been pressed on before the splines that are on the bottom start to stick out past whatever hub it is, whether it's a sprocket, a steering clutch, a flange. This is the type of fit you want to see. All right. Now, something that surprised me with old Frosty, I've got him at the same state of disassembly. So the sprocket's tight. I don't know how tight, because again, we see bull gear splines starting to stick out proud of that face. And then I see evidence like these nick marks here. Somebody had been in and cut that outer bearing off. So someone's been in doing some work to this. They changed a bearing, and I think they found that this sprocket was loose. So they just pressed that thing on till it tightened up, called her good. Typically, you see something like this, it's probably not going to take a lot of tonnage to pull it. That's my prediction right now. We will find out. Splines on this other side though, much better fit. So let's just go ahead, pull this one off. These are supposed to be pressed on at 25 tons, which means it should take 30 to 35 tons to pop them back loose. And when you don't press them on, you don't have a joint that stays tight. If anything is loose with a spline fit like this, you have a little bit of natural movement when it gets put into operation. Movement always leads to wear. Wear leads to increased clearance. This is what increased clearance does. It destroys parts. All right, now to pull the ones that are still tight on the splines. So here's what you need to do. Sprocket nut gets threaded back on and leave just a little bit of a gap between the nut and the sprocket hub. That's going to catch this when the taper lets go. I have my 30-ton hollow ram with the 30-ton 3-jaw fixed onto the Frosty sprocket that I didn't really like the looks of the spline fit. Let's see if I'm right in assuming this one's not going to take that much to pop loose. I really should be using my 50-ton ram for this task, but the 3-jaw puller I ordered for the 50-ton getting on 2 months ago now still isn't here. So this is the best that we've got. This is really a bit undersized for what this should be needing anyhow. We'll just see if we can make do with it today. Just doing one last check to make sure my sprocket hooks are as down as far on the roots of the spokes, as close to the hub as you can get. If you pull out here on the center section of the spoke, it will crack them. So you definitely want to be down where all the meat is. So let's see what it takes. Only about 5 tons so far. 8. 10. Oh, this is doing a little bit better than I thought it would. Okay, 15. 20. 26. Okay, we're just about at the full 30. I was wrong about those. Well, about 30 and a pump. I was wrong. I thought those were going to be just falling off loose, but yeah, I think we did it. Yep. This one still surprises me. Every spline fit I've ever seen like that on a sprocket has just almost fallen right apart. Well, I'm glad to be wrong, because it's an otherwise good sprocket. If it stays tight on splines, that means it's a user. So now, out of curiosity, I came over to the narrow RD-6. The side that I was bragging up said looked like it was such a good fit. Let's see if that one just falls off. We don't know today. It could go either way. 8 tons. That was about 14 tons, so we were still on the light side. But good splines. It's nice and tight. Okay, last call. Let's see what this one takes. $14. There's 20. $25. $26. About 28. There's our 30. Ring the bell, it works every time. To be absolutely honest with you, I wasn't planning on another hit. Well, I am happy that we popped all the sprockets today. I really should have had the 50 ton on that last one though. The 30 did it, but barely. And I found with these hydraulic pullers, if you stay within the first 2/3 of their capacity, they'll last a long, long time. But if you repeatedly take them right up to the ceiling, right to the max, they don't last very long if you keep doing that. So 50 ton would have ripped that last sprocket right off, but we got it done. So it would have been fun to try a 50 on there though. Next time, I'm sure I'm going to do something just as stupid as this eventually again. So that 50 will come in handy. Sprocket splines look good, just as I expected. Bull gear hub splines all look good. Yeah, and there's our inner bellows seal. Seals against this steel washer here, same as the one on the outside does. Back to the old Frosty parts tractor. This is the side that had the funny spline fit that I showed you all. And I noticed this. On the back side of the sprocket nut, somebody has machined that out and made clearance for those bull gear hub splines so that the rest of this still tightened against the sprocket hub. Yeah, so that was a very intentional modification right there. They knew they had some funny spline wear. Of course, the other side is flat, and you look at the other three, flat both sides, and flat both sides. Boy, that grease is thick on this side. It's still dragging. There we go. Well, I think we're going to wrap it right here. I had planned on getting a lot farther than this in this episode, but when you start working on into sprockets, there's a lot to be done. And I'm not just doing it on one corner. I've got 4 corners total. So pulling sprockets is usually the biggest hurdle when you get into the back end of a Caterpillar, and we got that done today. So next time, we'll move on to final drive covers, bull gears, bull gear hubs, inner bearings, and we should be able to work on in down to dead axles, and then after that, it's final drive pinions, flanges, and then brake mechanisms, and then we'll have empty tub. So, all right, hope you all enjoyed this episode. It was mildly fun once you get past the fact that lots of pressure, lots of tonnage involved in everything, and when things go bang, you really don't know which direction pieces are going to fly. Well, we got it all done. So I thank you all for watching. Hope to see you back again on the next one.